My name's Emily Martin, and I'm taking you behind the scenes to talk to equine artists from around the world. This is Artist Unlocked. Hey, what's up you guys, and welcome back to another episode of Artist Unlocked. We only have 2 more episodes, including this one, until we finish season 2. It's kind of hard for me to believe that we've gotten this far. Time has really flown since I started this show back in May when I was coming up with all the ideas for it, so it's kind of surreal to be here. This week's episode of Artist Unlocked features Shane of Workz Studios. Shane's work is absolutely stunning. Her work with oils is always so vibrant. She's known for her bays and her chestnuts, and her detail work is just insane as well. So overall, just a really well-rounded and talented artist. So I'm so excited for you guys to dive into this episode because this episode really serves as a beginner's guide to how to use oils. Really, Shane does go into great depth about, how she works with oils, what's worked for her, what hasn't worked for her, what brands she loves, things like that. So it's really an amazing episode. She is a wealth of knowledge, and I'm so excited for you guys to see it. If you haven't already, definitely go ahead and head over to my Instagram page. I have a giveaway running there right now that you can win. Hold on, I'll get her. This girl. This is the 2019 Breyer Web exclusive Teton is how I believe her name is pronounced. She's absolutely beautiful. She is glossy, as you guys can see, and she really doesn't have any flaws that I can find, so she's definitely show quality. Breyer kindly donated her to my giveaway. You'll also be winning an Artist Unlocked hoodie as well as the full Artist Unlocked Season 1 and Season 2 sticker collection, which is yet to be revealed. At the time of this episode's release, the giveaway only has one more day until it closes. It closes on October 31st at 11:59 p.m., so Halloween night. And so you're definitely going to want to go ahead and head over to my Instagram, read the description of the post that shows how to enter if you would like to be considered to win all of that stuff. And without further ado, let's get into the episode. So for those who don't know who you are, go ahead and just introduce yourself, your studio name, what you specialize in, things like that.
Okay, well, my name is Shane Langbauer. I run a studio called Workz Studio. I started it maybe 3 years ago, and I was always really inspired by Carol Williams, who isn't, and Jennifer Scott, and Nikki Button, and Amanda, and I really wanted to give it a try, and I fell in love with oils because of their vibrancy, so I think I specialize in oils, and I really love the red base colors, so I seem to be known for my chestnuts and my bays and those kinds of colors, which I'm totally fine with. I love those colors. Real horses, my first one was a bay, so they mean a lot to me.
Yeah.
I've been in the hobby for more than 10 years, but I started with original finish briars. I'd get briars every year for Christmas and for my birthday, and it was like a big highlight of the year. My parents got so sick of buying these briars. And one year my mom found out about Briar Fest and we went, and so this would have been our 11th straight year going.
Wow.
Yeah, but I don't know, maybe 6 years ago, I discovered artist resins, and I've never looked back. So that's kind of how I started in the art side of the hobby. I think I went to my first live show, and I saw them, and a big influence was Sharon Mossy. She's a big shower in Region 10 here, and she has an amazing artist resin collection. So that kind of pushed me towards, the art side. I was like, wow, that's what I want to do. And it kind of took off from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know, like you said, you're kind of known for your bays and your chestnuts and stuff, and they're gorgeous. All the work that you do is gorgeous. You're actually one of the inspirations for me to get into oils, because I tried pasteling and stuff for the longest time, and I couldn't get over the grain that I was getting, and so I finally tried oils, and I've had the most success so far with them. But yeah, your work is amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. I had the same idea. I wanted to start with something everyone said, you can do this, and it was pigments and pastels, and I was never able to get it down and get it to work for me. And my first few attempts at oils were awful, and I really mean awful, like brush strokes everywhere. There was no blending. But a lot of like practice and patience, and I think I bought every single book written by an artist for this hobby ever, and eventually something stuck and it started to improve.
Yeah. Do you have like any advice for oil artists that are looking to like improve some of the like the stereotypical things that come up with the medium, like the brush strokes and building up like a good color?
Hmm. So one thing I found that helped the most to avoid brush strokes, but also to build up color, is to use a colored primer or to airbrush a base color.
Mm.
Um, and I mean, it sounds pretty simple, but it made such a big difference for me. I really like the red primer to start beige and chestnuts and blacks and stuff. It just gives you that boost. You don't have to, work your way all the way up there. And putting a darker color over a lighter primer can really cause a lot of brush strokes and cause a lot of anxiety, I think, because it just takes so long to build up sometimes. Um, but another thing is, I started with Brumbacher, probably saying that wrong, but the Academy oil line. And they were really great. I think they're a perfect starting point because they're only like a few dollars each. And they allowed me to buy a ton of colors and really experiment with things before I like spent more money on other oil colors that maybe had a larger color selection or, gave you more options overall. Um, so I think that is kind of what really boosted that starting point. But to avoid brush strokes, it's really a practice thing in my opinion. And I was just talking to someone about this over on Facebook. They were asking for advice, and my advice was it just takes a lot of practice. What I found works best for me though is to sort of dry brush the oils on. I never quite got that wet blending technique down that a lot of artists talk about. I think that Chris Flint, who was formerly known as Chris Nandel when she wrote her book, she talks a bit about like the wet blending technique, and I know Carol Williams' Color Formulas and Techniques books talks about this too. But I never was able to do that without brush strokes. So what I will do is just dry brush a bit of color on, and once you start doing it, you kind of get a feel for how much paint you need. And I tend to just dab the tips of the bristles in, and sometimes I'll wipe a bit off. You really don't want to see any globs of paint on the brush, in my opinion, for this technique. And then it's just like applying pigments, I find. It feels really similar. It seems really similar. You just kind of scrub it on there and spread it out as far as it'll go. And the layers are really thin, so it dries really fast. But there's no possibility for brush strokes because it's just so thin. But it definitely took me a few months to really figure out, oh, that looks like too much paint, or that feels like too much paint, or,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, I know like one of the things that people complain about the most with oil is just like the dry time, and like obviously there's ways to like improve that. I know I moved away from cobalt dryer because like I had heard how bad it was for you. Like you have to be really careful when you're using that. Excuse me. But I know people use like Pearl X pigments, and that's what I use now, and I find that makes a huge difference. But you're right, like if you do thinner layers, like it's just not gonna be as hard to, you don't have to wait like a week for something to dry.
Yeah. I also started with the cobalt dryers, and I was not very careful. I like knew nothing about them. This is when I first started painting, so probably not a good example for new artists that want to start with oils. But once I found out, they're not really good for you. I have cats in my studio, which is kind of a sucks for the hair, but they would sometimes touch the paint, which, I tried not to let them do that, but I switched from a cobalt dryer to a drying linseed oil.
Mm.
And I like my oils to be on the thicker side. I don't want them to just kind of smear around. I want them to really settle into the whatever's underneath it. So what I do is I put them on a piece of cardboard and I'll mix them up. I always add Pearl X to pretty much everything I do, if not a metallic oil color. The Rembrandt ones are fabulous.
Mm.
And then I will add one drop of the drying linseed oil, and I don't remember the exact brand. Maybe it's Winsor & Newton. And then I just let it sit all together after I mix it up on the piece of cardboard, and I just cut up cardboard boxes. I let it sit for like 10 to 30 minutes and it'll absorb all that extra oil. So when you go to use it, it's thicker for one, but it also dries much faster just because you've taken away that little bit of oil. You do have to be a little careful with this because sometimes it can dry too quickly and all the oil gets pulled right out of it. But you tend to learn that pretty quickly, and you can see it'll start kind of getting duller and duller because it just all the oil is kind of leaving. So, but that does wonders for the dry time as well.
Okay, yeah, that's amazing. I'll have to try that because I've never done that before. How do you know, like, on average, I guess, for like the average horse, how many layers you're doing of oils before it's done?
Yeah, so I do mostly bays and chestnuts, I guess. It takes maybe 5 to 10 layers if I start over a red primer base color. So the first one I do is just a general base coat. It's blocking in the major areas of color. I don't really do too much shading or anything. And sometimes I need to do 2 or 3 base colors to get, especially for Grullias, it doesn't like to go over the warmer browns, don't like to go over that cooler gray primer. So that can take a few layers. And then I do about like 3 or so layers of just shading, tiny little brushes. I don't go over the whole horse all the time. It's just, I'll pick areas to work on here and there. Like this needs more depth, this needs more shading. But when it's said and done, maybe 5 to 10 per horse.
Yeah, that's not too bad compared to other mediums anyway. I feel like that's
Yeah.
kind of average across the board.
Yeah, like, I don't know how they do it. It's just 30 layers later and you're like, oh my God, you're not done yet.
Yeah, it's so easy to like get carried away and like, you know, I mean, I know for me too, like it's very easy to get perfectionistic about things too, and you just look at it and you'll walk away thinking it's great, and then you'll come back a day later and you're like, it could use more of this, and then pretty soon you're just down a rabbit hole.
Oh yes, I totally agree with that, and I have so been there. I can become a total perfectionist with some of these things, and I don't know, like 3 weeks later, I'm like, oh, maybe it needs a little more of this, you know?
Yeah, you have to kind of know when to just call it done and move on to the next piece.
Yeah,
But I also, go ahead.
oh, I learned that lesson recently with my Medallion Madness piece. I did a layer of pigments over the oils, and I wasn't sure if it was quite bright enough, but after I let it sit for a couple days, I realized, you know, it's good, it's soft, it's right where it needed to be. I'm glad I didn't keep going with this, you know, oil layer.
Yeah. I had one question that came to mind as you were talking about like working in sections with the horses. Do you mix your paint? Like, do you have specific color formulas so that if you like decide to work on one side of the horse, you don't go back to do the other side, it's like slightly off?
So one thing I noticed was there are all these books with color formulas. And when I first started with oils, I tried a lot of them and I never quite got the color formulas to work for me. So I don't use any color formulas. Every color I put on the horse is usually, unless it's just straight up black, which there's always some type of parallax in it anyway, is always a mix of a few different colors, and it changes every single time. I don't know if that's necessarily good advice for everyone because it does make it harder to work in sections, but I never, if I'm gonna mix them up, I do the whole body at once, or when I do shading, I'll only do shading on the face. And then later I'll carry it over. But I've come to memorize some of the color formulas that I kind of create over time. And I keep a little journal of the ones that I don't use very often in case I forget them. But
Right.
no, I don't have any like set formulas really. Each horse is different and requires a little more of this or a little more of that to get whatever color I'm trying to achieve, because the reference photos are just all so different.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wish I did, but I don't.
No, I mean, I think that's cool too, because I think sometimes, I know I felt this way when I was first starting out, is like there's a decent amount of information out there on various mediums, and I think sometimes it can be easy to get caught up in like, I have to do it based off of this to get a chestnut or whatever, and sometimes like the best results are just playing around and finding what works for you. And so like I think it's a little bit freeing for people out there that maybe feel stuck in like the color formula books. I think they're good like jumping off points, especially as you're learning about colors and how, you know, different horses are made up with the colors in them. But yeah, so no, I don't fault you for that at all. I think that's great.
I think you just like, that is such a good point, that when you start out, you read these books and you see these posts on Facebook about, you know, what your idols are doing, how they're doing it. You think, I have to do it that way. I have to use the exact, you know, medium. I have to use that exact color, that brand. Everything needs to be exact, and I'll be able to paint just like them.
Right.
And I think as you keep going through your kind of art journey, you realize that that's not the case, and you kind of have to find your own style. But they're really good jumping off point. You might discover this item that you love, or this color that just works so perfectly for something else. But you really do find your own thing after a while, and you realize that just because you use the same items or the same techniques, your work doesn't look anything like your idols. It's your own style, and it's really nice. I really do enjoy that part of it.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think, you know, you mentioning medallions, I think, obviously they're more popular now in the hobby. I kind of consider them like, you know, one of the more trendy things to do, along with like the micro minis. And I think they can be like a really good place to start for people that are looking to experiment with colors and oils and things like that, because they're smaller. And so you won't obsess as much, you know, about getting the whole horse done. They don't take as much time, and they're cheaper. So it's like you're not dumping hundreds of dollars on something that you might mess up when you're first starting out.
Yeah, absolutely. When I did the medallion proposal to NAMSHA, that was one of the big points in the proposal, was medallions are a cheaper, smaller alternative to beginner artists as something new to start painting. It can be really intimidating to get this expensive resin. Even, I mean, like these resins just go up in price, especially the traditionals. And when you're just starting out, that's a really big canvas. I mean, it doesn't necessarily seem like it to people that just collect, or even some artists that have just never painted before. They don't realize how big it is, and you need to paint and give attention to every single millimeter on that canvas and that model. So medallions are a great alternative. They are smaller generally. I mean, we've gotten some very large ones lately. They're cheaper. You really just focus on one side of it, and you can really go to town. Like, I've tried out so many new techniques on medallions that I would never try on a full model, because I don't want to ruin it, but also it's kind of a pain in the butt to have to strip the full models too. They're clunky. You have to find a bin large enough for them.
Yeah.
But the medallions, it's a smaller canvas, and you can really focus on what you're doing. So I think it's great that now they're NAN qualifying, because you don't feel like I'm wasting time on this piece because it's going to sit on my shelf when I'm done with it. While it was a great learning tool, so now they're more than a learning tool. They're really taking off, and I think I have to credit the sculptors for that, because I couldn't have done any of it without the sculptors, and I'm just so happy that they continue to make these beautiful little pieces.
Yeah, totally agree. And I identify with what you're saying about, you know, now we can show them, because I struggle like justifying a purchase in my head, like from an artistic standpoint. Like, I really like to show my work, and so it's like, if it's just gonna sit on my shelf, like it just kills me a little to spend a certain degree of money on something like that. So yeah, so true.
Absolutely. They don't, I mean, depending on the color and pattern, of course, they don't take as much time. So when I was at college, I had no time to paint, and I couldn't bring any like full models with me. So medallions were the perfect solution. I could bring some to my apartment. I could work on them. I could paint some while I came home on vacations and breaks. And so they also work really great for that. It's just not so time consuming as a full model, which seems to take me longer and longer every time I paint one.
Yeah, it's part of the journey.
Yeah,
I guess
absolutely.
since we're like kind of talking studio stuff, I'll just go down that route, and then we can kind of circle back and talk about more of like the broad brushed hobby related questions.
Sure.
So what does your studio look like?
So my parents are great. They're very supportive of the hobby, and I know that that can be such a make or break point for some newer artists that are younger. So when we bought this house a few years ago, they gave me the dining room. So we just converted the downstairs dining room into a studio. And the last couple years, my mom, she started a jewelry business, so we share it now. But my dad made me a little airbrush tent with an exhaust fan, and I have a couple painting tables and a couple shelves and a little photo booth. But yeah, it's just downstairs right off the kitchen. So when we have guests, they're like, what is this disaster that has paint everywhere? um, but yeah, it's just a little room downstairs. There's paint tubes all over the place. There's cans of primer on all the shelves. It's not the most beautiful looking room, but it's pretty functional.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's so cool of them to let you just have that room, and like that's also cool that you share it with your mom. Like, you know, getting to do that together, I'm sure is a good bonding experience.
I could not have done anything in this hobby without her. Before I could drive, she took me to shows. She took me to Briarfest. She still goes to shows with me and Briarfest, and she's just known as Shane's mom. And she sits at my table, and everyone comes says hi to her. So she actually some of my larger resin purchases for my personal collection. We split the cost a lot of times for Christmas or my birthday and stuff. So I couldn't have most of the resins I have without her because I've been in school. Yes. So I don't have like a job that really pays for this stuff. So I guess I do really owe it all to her and my dad for being able to paint at all, because they really let me jump off. They bought all my first art supplies and stuff, so they're great.
That's amazing. Yeah, I know how you feel with the college thing. Are you graduated yet, or?
I just graduated this semester, so my diploma should be in the mail any day now.
Yay! I'm sure it feels great to be done.
Yes.
What are your favorite tools or materials to use within that?
So my favorite oils just recently, and I hope long term, have been the Rembrandt oil colors. They have such a large color selection, and their metallic oils are just perfection. I tend to really enjoy Pearl-Ex, but the metallic oils from Rembrandt have sort of replaced them in a lot of my little homemade color formulas. But I also really like pan pastels, and as someone who started with earth pigments, pan pastels are so much better. They are so much more pigmented and rich, easier to use because they come in a nice compact form instead of like a loose powder. But those are my main two sort of brands that I stick to, and I have so many colors by each of them. But for airbrushing base colors, I love the Tamiya. I guess they're just acrylics. They can be kind of difficult to find. Sometimes the Tamiya website just doesn't work or something, but they're really good. They're opaque and they're matte, and I don't have to seal. I can just go in with oils and pigments right on top of it. And the Rembrandt oils work really well with everything. But Gamblin has come out with some really cool oil colors that I've started to incorporate more and more. They have this Reclaimed Earth series that another hobbyist, Kim, told me about. She posted it, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. And as you know, a biotechnology infectious diseases major that's really into microbiology, I was like, the Reclaimed Earth series kind of piqued my interest, and I've gotten more and more Gamblin colors as time goes on. And they have this gray, and I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's just when they clean their machines, they just pile it all into one color, and it turned out to a really fabulous gray. So they don't waste a lot. They come up with these really cool, environmentally sustainable and interesting ways to make new colors, and I really love that. So I see Gamblin being a big brand in my little oil color box too.
That's amazing, because I know I'm always looking for ways to either be safer with the things that I'm using, less toxic stuff, and then, you know, the sustainability aspect of it too, because naturally art isn't the most resource conscious thing. You're, you know, going through a lot of different things and like the plastics in all of the containers and all of that stuff. So anything more sustainable is really cool to know.
Yeah. And one other thing I feel like new artists, and just, you know, tool wise is makeup brushes. They have been a game changer for me. They are cheaper. You can get a whole pack of them on Amazon and they're fluffy. I like firm, soft brushes for my oils, so they're really perfect. Like the angled brushes are great. And I tend to use more of like these no-name brand random Amazon makeup brushes than I do the larger, like actually have a brand name paintbrushes that I can find on Flick or at Jerry's or something.
Right.
And I think that's a common misconception or belief, is that artists need to have the most expensive, most well-known brands and items to use, like tool-wise or just medium-wise. And I think that in some aspects it can make a difference to the overall appearance of your work, but for the most part, there's nothing wrong with using like the Academy line of oils. I painted my Lucius, who's won a lot at NAN, with the Academy oils, and you know, no real name brand anything, and you can get the same result you get with these really expensive items. You don't need to go spend your whole paycheck on the Rembrandt oils, which can really get up there in price. So just do what works for you, and you don't have to listen to the people that say buy the most expensive thing out there.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a balance. Like, you know, there's obviously like when you're first starting out, like definitely don't, especially if you're trying something for the first time, like don't necessarily go and like break the bank on it, because if you don't like it, then you're just like, you just spent all this money on something. Yeah, and obviously like there's a certain degree of you know, materials that you need to use that will produce like the certain high quality result that you're after. But yeah, like to some degree, using cheaper products doesn't mean that your work's going to be any less. It's really just about how you use it, and maybe they're like a little more challenging to work with, but like they can still get to the same result.
Absolutely. I mean, I still use the Academy oil line that I have here on various pieces, and I still really like them. I do there's a few people in Region 10 who are definitely in the more expensive art stuff to, you know, that's best. And we make jokes about it all the time, but it works just as well. And that's totally right. Don't go buy something really expensive if you're just going to try it out. I can't tell you how many random art things I have that I spent a ton of money on that just did not work for me. I have like a whole bin in my studio of things I won't touch again that I spent so much money on. But
yeah, I spent like a ton of money on like 30 things of earth pigments, and I have them, and they're like nice occasionally to have like the flexibility of so many different colors.
yeah.
But I really like wish I hadn't gone and bought so many of them right away, because it's like, you're right, like I had struggles with earth pigments too. I really want to get into using pan pastels because I've heard so many good things.
Yeah, I have a bin of earth pigments that I have not touched in really long time, years long. The only earth pigment that I love and that I use consistently is their dark neutral brown. But otherwise, I don't think I've touched an earth pigment color in a few years. I don't want to get rid of them. You're correct. I like the flexibility and I like knowing that I have that option, but they're so weak color-wise and payoff when you compare them to pan pastels. But the drawback of pan pastels is they don't have a ton of colors. They have a lot of grays and some yellows and oranges and a few red browns. But for the most part, I can't imagine painting like a complex color with just pan pastels. And I know there are people that do it, like magicians, but I can't imagine doing that. It just seems very limiting. And so I love them to like add very precise shading that I can go over with oils, but they're superior to earth pigments, but there's some limiting factors in there to be sure.
Yeah, for sure. So do you have a favorite and a least favorite scale to work in?
Yeah, so this doesn't count as a scale, but my favorite to work on are medallions. But I also really love to work on curio scale models. I think they're the perfect size. You know, it's not like huge and daunting like a traditional, but it's also not like super teeny tiny. You can really fit a little more detail in there. But I mean, stablemate scale is not bad, but my least favorite would have to be micro minis and like oversized traditionals. Like some of those really, like, I think they're 1/12 scale egg roll models. Like, or some people say e-roll, but I don't know. I've always said egg roll in my
Yeah.
head. Egg roll it is. But yeah, I can't imagine having to paint some of those like really big ones. And then micro minis, while some people can fit like the most insane detail, like when I think of those, I think Nikki Button
Oh
or
my
Nikki
gosh.
O'Neill now. She just fits an insane amount of detail into them, and I can't imagine ever doing that myself. So I paint very few of them for that reason.
Agreed. They're just so tiny, and I feel like I lose my eyesight just doing
Yeah.
them. Even with like although I've tried magnifiers, and I feel like it takes away some of that like tangibility of like being able to actually see where you're painting. So it's like I'm not the hugest fan of those either, but it's like, yeah, I totally agree with you with the micros.
Eyes are some of my favorite things to paint. When I get done with the body color, I'm like, yes, we get to do eyes now. And on micro minis, you can have a little bit of detail, but it's impossible to get that full level of detail and to really have that like eyeball painting experience, in my opinion. So they just kind of lack that for me.
Yeah, totally. And your eyes are gorgeous. I know you've done tutorials on them too, I believe, if I'm
Yeah, I did a tutorial in Jamie's magazine, Imagine Equine,
yes.
um, on brown eyes, and I plan to do one on blue eyes eventually. I just, every time I have a medallion that works for it, I forget to take pictures of this or that. So soon, but yeah, I felt like it was a really comprehensive tutorial that I did for her, with video and everything. So if you're not subscribed to Imagine Equine, I think it's a really great magazine for the hobby, and she covers so many large events and talks to so many artists, and I think it's a really great thing to be subscribed to.
Totally agree. So what would your tips be for those who are looking to get to where you are now?
I mean, everyone says this, and it's kind of like, oh my God, stop. But patience, practice, and patience is my number one thing. And don't be afraid to reach out to artists. I don't think I'd be where I am today if I didn't reach out to artists and be like, I love that color. Do you have any tips, or can you tell me what color formula you used? Or and I know a lot of artists will just be like, not answer you, or just, want to keep that to themselves. But there are a lot of really great artists out there, that want to help you and that want to kind of foster, younger artists. And that would kind of be my number one tip, is to put yourself out there, share your work everywhere. People will chime in like, oh, I love this. And once I think if you want to be successful in this hobby, you have to make sure that you're painting things that appeal to the masses too, as well as yourself. And just, figure out what they like, figure out what you like, and find a nice balance of that.
Yeah, totally agree. Great tips. So I'll come back now to like the overall hobby side of things. I've been asking people, what is your favorite part of the hobby? This could be art side or not.
Definitely the art side for me. I love like the people in the art side. They're always really fun to chat with. But I started in the OF Breyer side, and I always really loved it. But kind of as time went on and I was introduced to artist resins, I felt that the OF models became a little simple. They were all the same. When you show them, there's not that competitive edge unless it's like collectability. But then to me, it's all money and not
Right.
talent, which some people totally disagree with. And no offense to the OF collectors, but my favorite part would have to be the art side of the hobby. And I think the Artisans Gallery at Briarfest has to be my favorite part of the whole year, because they all come together in one place and you can talk to them and see everything. And it's kind of my favorite thing, just put into one little place for a couple days a year.
Yeah, it's great to be able to see, like, one of the things is that, we're all pretty spread out for the most part, even across the world. And so, like, every time we have, like, a place where, a good chunk of them can congregate and you get to see it all, it's really nice to kind of see the body of work that's, in the hobby.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always so much creativity at the Artisans Gallery and even at shows and looking at the painted artist resins, and it's really inspiring. And I don't think I'd still be in the hobby if I didn't find the art side of it, because I think I would have just lost the inspiration as time went on with the OFs.
Yeah, I agree. I have like in the background here, I have like my small her that are either like really sentimental from when I was a kid or ones that I just like randomly fell in love with that I just can't part with. But
Oh
it's
yeah, I have those too.
yeah, other than that, it's like I'm totally with you there. I love the art side. That's kind of where my heart is now. But yeah.
Yeah, I have a thing for the glossy briars, so I definitely have a little handful left over that I can't bring myself to part with yet, or like the prize models that I won when I first started painting and I showed in the Briarfest Youth Show, but otherwise it's all artist resins.
Yeah. So, I've been also asking people this, and um, is there something that you feel is missing or that we could see more of in the hobby? This could be like, you know, a trait that you think is missing from people in the hobby. It could be like an event, anything really.
Um, that's a very interesting question. And I think one of the things I felt was missing, and I think this niche is being filled now, is getting to know the artist. So I think that this podcast is really great for that, and
Oh.
Imagine Equine, the magazine, is really great for that. But otherwise, I feel that the hobby is tailored only to competition. There's no, other than, Briarfest, there's no real community building events. You don't get to meet very many people. You don't get to know them. It's all like, we're going to show against each other and may the best model win. And I think that while I might be a little biased because Kylie's a friend and she's just an amazing person, I think that her show in January for Medallions, that it's not really a show, it's more of a community building event. And I think we need to have more of those. And I know it's, we're all spread out, like you said, around the world, and it can be really hard and really expensive. And, we can't get time off work or whatever to go do them. But I think we should, as a hobby, make more time for those and make them more accessible. Those types of events that aren't only to win prizes that, your model can be known for or something.
Yeah.
But I think we do need the competition too, obviously, because it's fun.
Yeah.
But the community building events would be great, and I think they're kind of lacking in the hobby. I felt when I started in the hobby, it was kind of hard to make friends because my only interaction in person was shows. And while, you talk to people, you don't really connect with them. You're all busy running around to this ring or that ring or trying to do this and that.
Right.
And I think Briarfest alleviates some of that. You have like the arena events and the little fun contests and the artisans gallery and the like, banquet and stuff. But I think we do need more, and I think that she's starting to fill that with her show in January.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we deserve more events where like people are just able to come, and like maybe they're like workshops, where people come and we can, share tips, or maybe they're literally just like, hangout events where we can all get to know each other better, because I think that also helps then when you are showing, because you already have that relationship built up with people. Because you're right, it's really hard to build like a lasting connection when you're like running around trying to put horses on the table, and it is competition, so it's like it's a bit difficult. And I definitely felt like it was hard when I first started showing, and I still feel this a little bit. It's like definitely helped. I think this show even has helped me get out there and to really connect with people more, but it's hard to be new in the show ring, and like it's hard to make lasting connections.
One event that I think kickstarted this was when there was no Nan. They held the No Nonsense event, and I'm blanking on the year, but I was really honored to be a part of it, and it was so well run. A lot of artists were asked to do little workshops, just go do what you do, paint at the table, have people ask you questions. Other artists would come and be like, I do this, have you tried that? Like, it was a really great just community building event. Everyone got to just hang out. There was no stress about showing or anything. And Sarah Mink was there, and a lot of other like big name artists that you just always wanted to meet, but if you see them at shows, they're just too busy or something.
Right.
So it was a really great experience, and I'm so glad that they put that on, and I keep hoping that maybe they can find time to do that again. I know it was a lot of work, and when they did do it, it was kind of they didn't have maybe a lot of time to do it, but it was really great, and I thought that was an event that I would like to go to again if they ever held it. So yeah,
Yeah.
I just really enjoyed it, and I definitely want them to do it again, though. I mean, I hope there's Nan too, so
Yeah.
that
Both. We'll
might be a
have,
trade-off.
yeah, exactly. We'll have both next time. So as we kind of wrap up here, we're getting deep. Overall, what does the hobby mean to you?
The hobby is friendship to me. I mean, I've met some of the best people through this hobby, and while I'm really into the competitive part of it and the art side of it, I don't really consider myself an artist. I mean, I can't even draw a stick figure horse, but the hobby has just meant friendship and acceptance, and a place I can go and just hang out. Even at shows, I feel I can sometimes just hang out, and it's not a competition. And being a person that's very academic, and I'm always in like high stress academic environments, the hobby has been that one place that I don't need to be a perfectionist. While it sometimes creeps in, the hobby is very important to me for that. It's the one place I can just kind of relax and do my thing. So,
Yeah. For
yeah.
sure. So what are your future goals? These could be short-term or long-term goals.
So, I mean, overall, my main goal is to just become a better painter. I want to really like the Liz Shaw quality of Harry, and like I want to do that. So I want to work towards that, but maybe more of a goal would be to learn to sculpt. I would love to maybe produce medallions and maybe get into the customizing aspect of this a little more. But otherwise, I always kind of toyed with the idea of starting a YouTube account for like, oil painting,
Do
and
it.
just hobby stuff in general. I really like helping people and mentoring new artists, because as someone who didn't come from like an artistry background, and really had no exposure to art before jumping into the hobby and learning to paint, I want to mentor those people, and I think a YouTube account where I can post videos would be a really great place to do that, because I obviously can't travel around the world to help them one-on-one.
Right.
But every time I go to do it, something gets in the way, or I don't have the equipment. So it's a future goal that I'd like to do. I don't know much about technology. I suck so bad at like iMovie and stuff. So that was one thing I did not fulfill when I was at college. Cornell had some really great like filmmaking and that type of class, and I never took one, and I always really wanted to. I had kind of hoped to pull the hobby into my college experience a little bit, and I never did. But that's kind of a long-term goal, I guess, the YouTube account, but something
Yeah.
that I would love to actually fulfill one day.
Yeah, I'm sure people would love to see that. I mean, like right now, like there are artists that post like occasionally that I would consider that are like definitely still in the YouTube space, but like right now, I really only see on the art side of things anyway. There's like Blue Mountain Stables and DJB are like the two ones right now that are doing lots of YouTube. So I think the more the merrier. And I totally get like the tech aspect can be weird. And if you have any questions, feel free to like hit me up because I can
That would
maybe
be
help.
great. Yeah, Christina Riley does some really great videos that are very informational too.
Yes.
And I learned so much from them, and I think there's a gap for oil colors and for pigments in some cases. And I see a lot of like airbrush artists, and like no flack to the airbrush artists. I started airbrushing and just found it wasn't for me, but I think oils are really intimidating, and it's kind of, I feel like, a duty of mine to make them less intimidating for new artists, because it's totally doable.
Yeah. I totally forgot about Christina Riley. So yes, she's totally another one. I'm probably forgetting others too. So I like to leave this last little bit up to you to, promote yourself, your work. Where can people find you? What can they be looking for next?
Okay, so my next big thing is my Briar Fest sale. So I have been working around the clock, day and night, when it's not like 100 degrees and like so humid. I have so many fun things that I plan to do for that sale, and I'm finally gonna paint a traditional scale model again for that, so that's
Yay.
great. But I mean, otherwise, you can find me on Facebook. It's Workz Studio, art by Shane Langbauer, and you can find me on Instagram. I tend to post more work in progress photos on Instagram, and my handle is the Horse Hobbyist. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a YouTube yet, but Facebook is the main place to find me. And I like to post little tutorials and, all the good stuff from my friends I like to share. And yeah, that's where you can find me, hanging out all the time, probably way too much.
Go check her out. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, well, thank you again so much for doing this and being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Alright, you guys, that was the episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. Definitely go ahead and check out all of Shane's work. I will leave all the links to her stuff in the description below. Next week's episode, the season 2 finale, features Darren of DJB Studios. You guys probably all know and love Darren. Her work is amazing. She has made waves in the hobby with her work and her YouTube tutorials, which have helped so many other talented artists get their start in the hobby, as well as just get tips and tricks. I know I love watching her videos as well. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.